Hello viewers, I am Dr. Rabiul. I work as a lecturer in pathology in a medical college hospital, and I am making this video for my students and also for you. Hope someone finds this helpful. Today we will talk about a topic from your nutritional diseases chapter, and today's topic is on vitamin A. In this video, first we will discuss briefly some introductory points regarding vitamins. Then we will talk about vitamin A, which will include the chemistry of vitamin A, its dietary sources, metabolism, functions of vitamin A, and since vitamin A has an important role in the visual cycle, so we will also talk briefly about the visual cycles, and we will also discuss vitamin A deficiency and vitamin A toxicity, and finish our discussion today by briefly talking about the RDA, or recommended daily allowances of vitamin A. Okay, so a lot of topics, so let's begin. First question, what is vitamin A? Now, in order to understand vitamin A, first we have to know some basic concepts regarding vitamins. So what do we mean by vitamins? So as written in your textbook, vitamins are organic substances which cannot be synthesized within the body and are essential for maintenance of normal structure and function of cells. Okay, so I'm repeating the definition again for my students. Vitamins are organic substances that cannot be synthesized within the body and are essential for maintenance of the normal structure and function of the cells. Now we can classify vitamins into two groups. Some are fat-soluble vitamins and some are water-soluble vitamins. And vitamin A is one of the fat-soluble vitamins. The other fat-soluble vitamins besides vitamin A will include vitamin D, E, and K. So A, D, E, K, these vitamins are fat-soluble vitamins. And in the second group, that is the water-soluble vitamins, there we will have vitamin C and vitamin B complex. Now, one thing you have to remember that in British accent it is pronounced as vitamins. So vitamins or vitamins both are correct. So now that we have talked about some introductory points regarding vitamins, now we are ready to focus on vitamin A. So let's talk about the chemistry of vitamin A first. Now, one thing we have to remember, vitamin A is not a single molecule. As a matter of fact, it is a name given to a group that contains some related compounds, and they will include retinol, retinal, and retinoic acid. All these compounds are in the group vitamin A. So let's talk about these things briefly. So first one was retinol. Now notice the ol at the end of this word, and that is indicating that this compound is in fact an alcohol. This is a primary alcohol. So that is retinol. The second compound was retinal. Notice it had Al at the end of this word. So it is denoting that retinal is in fact an aldehyde. And you also have to remember, we can get retinal from retinol by oxidation. Okay, so one more thing you have to remember, that we can also get retinol from retinal. So these two compounds are interconvertible, but that won't be the case when we talk about the latter compound. So the third compound was retinoic acid. It is derived from retinal by oxidation. However, we cannot get retinal by reducing retinoic acid. So retinol and retinal, these two are interconvertible, but retinal and retinoic acid, they are not. So this is a very important difference that you have to remember. So now that we have talked about the chemistry of vitamin A, now we will move on and talk about the dietary sources. And as you can see in the board, we can see that vitamin A has both animal sources and plant sources. So in the animal source, we can get vitamin A from fish liver, for example from cod liver oil, that is very rich in vitamin A. So that is one animal source. We can also get vitamin A from liver, from egg yolk, milk products like butter, etc. So all these are the animal sources of vitamin A. And moving on to the plant sources of vitamin A, always remember that carrot is very rich in vitamin A. As a matter of fact, we will see that the plants contain vitamin A in a provitamin form that is known as carotene, and as a matter of fact that word is derived from carrot, because carrot has rich concentration of vitamin A. Besides carrots, vitamin A rich vegetables will also include green leafy vegetables, squash, spinach, etc. So now that we have talked about the dietary sources of vitamin A, now we will move on and talk about the metabolism of vitamin A. Now, in order to understand the metabolism of vitamin A, you can see that I have drawn a flowchart in the whiteboard. Okay, I hope you're still with me. You didn't run away just like my students do when I try to show them flowcharts or teach them definitions. I even have to show them teddy bear to keep them calm. So look, I am also showing you a teddy. So look at the teddy. Don't run away because I will try to explain this flowchart now. Okay, so in the flowchart, first we can see that we get vitamin A from both animal and plant sources. We get preformed vitamin A from the animal sources, and as a matter of fact that is in the form of retinol ester. So that means it also has fatty acid in this compound. So first, that retinol ester is broken down into retinol and ester with the help of the enzyme that has derived from the pancreas, and it is called the pancreatic esterase. So these enzymes coming from the pancreas will break retinol ester into retinol and fatty acids. On the other hand, we also get vitamin A from the plant sources, and I have already mentioned the term carotene, but also remember that carotene is in fact the provitamin form of vitamin A. Okay, so first that thing has to be cleaved, and that is done by this enzyme, and that will cleave that carotene molecule into retinol, and then another enzyme known as retinol reductase will convert this retinol into retinol. So what will happen? Either from animal source or from plant source we are getting retinol ultimately, and that thing will be taken up by the cells of the intestine, which are known as enterocyte. And after they have taken those vitamin A in the form of retinol from both sources, they will again convert that thing into retinol ester. Then these retinol esters will be packaged inside chylomicrons. Now what do we mean by this thing, chylomicrons? These are one type of lipoproteins. They help in transport of various lipid particles from the intestine. So once the retinol ester is packaged within the chylomicron, now they are ready to travel. and they will go to the liver. They will be transported to the liver via blood. What will happen next? Then liver will uptake vitamin A from the chylomicron, and they will also store that in the form of retinol ester. Now what will happen next? When needed, this retinol can be released from the liver and transported to extrahepatic tissue with the help of a protein known as retinol binding protein. So there is a complex formed between the retinol and the retinol binding protein. And in the peripheral tissue where we use vitamin A, there are receptors for this complex. So with the help of those specific receptors, this retinol and retinol binding protein complex can bind with those peripheral cells, and then retinol is released from the retinol binding protein and taken up by the peripheral tissues. And the retinol binding protein can be reused again. So what is happening after retinol is taken up in the peripheral tissues? So some of the retinol will be converted to retinoic acid, and that will help in various cellular events. And in case of the visual cycle, we will see that some retinol will be taken up by the rods and cones cells, and they will help in vision. So this was in short about the metabolism of vitamin A. Now we will talk about the functions of vitamin A. Now vitamin A has 4 important functions that you must know. The first function is obvious. Vitamin A helps in vision by synthesizing the light-sensitive visual pigments inside the rods and cones of our retina. The second function is it helps in growth and differentiation of tissues. The third function of vitamin A is regarding host resistance to infections. Vitamin A helps in providing host resistance to infection. Now how is that achieved? Always remember that vitamin A has an important role in maintenance and differentiation of immune system cells, epithelial cells, and mucus secreting cells. And this is how it provides protection or resistance against infection. Vitamin A also have role in reproduction. So these were the major functions of vitamin A, and now we will move on and talk about the visual cycle. Now always remember, 4 forms of vitamin A containing visual pigments are involved in the visual process. So they will include the visual pigment rhodopsin and also 3 forms of iodopsin. Now rhodopsin is present in the rod cells of the retina, and it is the most light-sensitive visual pigment. Therefore, rhodopsin is important for low-light vision or dim-light vision. On the contrary, iodopsin are present in the cone cells of the retina. Like I said, there are 3 forms of iodopsin, and they have a specific responsiveness for specific color and also for bright light. Therefore, iodopsin, this visual pigment, is involved in color vision and bright light vision. So what is the role of vitamin A in visual cycle? So in order to explain that, now we have to focus on this flowchart, and we will give our example with the help of the visual pigment rhodopsin. So first let's focus on this part of the diagram. So here we have rhodopsin, and notice how rhodopsin is produced. It is produced by combining a protein, that is opsin, a 7 transmembrane protein. So we are combining opsin with 11-cis retinal to make rhodopsin. Now whenever rhodopsin is getting exposed to light, or whenever photon of light is passing on rhodopsin, what is happening? The 11-cis retinal component of rhodopsin is getting isomerized into all-trans retinal. So initially it was 11-cis retinal. Upon exposure to light, that has become all-trans retinal. And what will happen then? That will result in dissociation of all-trans retinal from rhodopsin. That will result in conformational changes in the opsin. That will cause downstream signaling and generation of nerve impulse, and those nerve impulse will be transmitted with the help of neurons from the retina to the brain with the help of neurons and nerves. Okay, so that is how the visual cycle will go on. And also notice that part of all-trans retinal will again re-isomerize into 11-cis retinal, and we can use that thing again to produce rhodopsin. Okay, but the problem lies here. Most of the all-trans retinal will be further converted to all-trans retinol, and that thing will be lost. And therefore, we will need dietary supplementation to replenish that lost amount of vitamin A that was needed in the visual cycle. So we will get all-trans retinol from the diet, and that thing will be isomerized into 11-cis retinol, and then 11-cis retinol will be dehydrogenated and produce 11-cis retinal. Okay, so just pay attention to the ends of these words because they are a bit confusing in the beginning. So whenever you see all, that means alcohol, and L at the end means aldehyde. Okay. So this was in short about the role of vitamin A in the visual cycle. Always remember that vitamin A is required, particularly the 11-cis retinal form, to produce visual pigments, and therefore we need dietary supplementation to replenish the store of vitamin A. So now that we have talked about the visual cycle, now we will move on and talk about the vitamin A deficiencies. Now, vitamin A deficiency will have both ocular and extraocular manifestations. So first, let's talk about the ocular manifestations because they happen earlier. So first there will be night blindness, and it is obvious. We have just mentioned the role of vitamin A in the visual cycle, particularly in low light conditions. So deficiency of vitamin A will result in difficulty of vision in low light conditions, and that is known as night blindness. This will be followed by xerophthalmia or dry eye. Now, why will this thing happen? Because recall that the normal function of vitamin A also included differentiation of epithelial cells. So that function will be lost or reduced when there is deficiency of vitamin A. Moreover, there will be squamous metaplasia whenever there is deficiency of vitamin A. And those squamous epithelial cells will also release keratin, so there will be keratinization as well. Now, this condition, this keratinization of cells of the lacrimal gland will result in stoppage of tear secretion, so that will lead to dryness. Dryness will also happen in the conjunctiva, which is known as conjunctival xerosis. There will be also keratinization of the cornea, and one thing you will see in your textbook is regarding the Beethoven's spot. Okay, so Beethoven's spot happens whenever keratin debris are deposited in small opaque plaques over the cornea. Okay, so all these things will happen due to vitamin A deficiency, and they are together known as xerophthalmia or dry eye. And Moreover, if the condition persists, it will become more severe, and there will be erosion and roughened corneal surface, and the cornea will become soft, and ultimately the cornea may even become destroyed. There will be destruction of the cornea, and ultimately this can lead to blindness. And these erosion, ulceration, and softening and destruction of the cornea, all these things together are also known as keratomalacia. So these were the ocular manifestations of vitamin A deficiency, but also remember that vitamin A has important roles in host resistance against infection. So whenever there is deficiency of vitamin A, that will make the patient prone to certain types of infection. Vitamin A deficiency will also result in squamous metaplasia of the lining epithelium of respiratory tract. Now always remember, the upper respiratory tract is normally lined by pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, and this epithelium had ciliary function, and it also secreted mucus. And all these things, the ciliary function and the mucus secretion, all these things normally provided protection. However, when we will see vitamin A deficiency, this mucociliary epithelium will be replaced by squamous epithelium, and those functions will be lost. Those ciliary function and the mucus secreting function will be lost, and this will make the upper respiratory tract more prone to secondary infection. Similarly, vitamin A deficiency will also result in squamous metaplasia in the urinary tract, and there will be keratin debris, desquamated keratin debris in the urinary tract and bladder will result in renal stone and bladder stone. In the skin, vitamin A deficiency will result in a condition known as toad skin, and this will usually happen due to hyperkeratinization of the epidermis of the skin, and also due to plugging of the ducts of the adnexal glands. So all these things will ultimately result in follicular or papular dermatosis. And also remember that vitamin A deficiency will make the patient prone to infection. Some common infections, for example measles, infectious diarrhea and pneumonia will have more severe consequences in a patient of vitamin A deficiency. In other words, there will be high rate of mortality from common infections like measles, pneumonia and infectious diarrhea in a patient of vitamin A deficiency. However, also remember that supplementation of vitamin A will reduce the rate of mortality 20 to 30%. So now that we have talked about the deficiency states of vitamin A, now we will move on and talk about vitamin A toxicity. Now the manifestations of vitamin A toxicity was first described in 1597, centuries ago, before the actual vitamin A was even discovered. Now what happened in 1597? A carpenter and Dutch officer named Gerrit de Veer, this fellow became stranded in the Arctic. So their ship was stranded, and so they had to rely on polar bear, and they consumed polar bear liver, and that was rich in vitamin A, and that led to some manifestations. And vitamin A toxicity, it can be both acute or chronic in nature, and whenever there is acute vitamin A toxicity or acute hypervitaminosis A, that will result in headache, vomiting, blurring of vision, stupor, etc. Now the problem is, these are non-specific clinical features, and often we see this type of clinical features in a patient that had brain tumor. And that's why this is also known as pseudotumor cerebri, because here we are having these manifestations not due to brain tumor but due to vitamin A toxicity, and that's why it is known as pseudo or false pseudotumor cerebri. Now moving on to the chronic toxicity, chronic hypervitaminosis A may result in anorexia, nausea, vomiting, bones and joint pain, and weight loss. Now, why will we have bones and joint pain in chronic vitamin A toxicity? Because always remember, vitamin A activates osteoclast, and that will result in increased bone resorption, and that will make the bones more prone to fracture and also result in bones and joint pain. So this was in short about vitamin A toxicity, and now we will talk about the recommended daily allowances of vitamin A. Now we usually express the recommended daily dietary allowances of vitamin A in the unit retinol equivalent, or RE. For the adult male it is 1000, for the adult female it is 800, for female during their period of pregnancy and lactation it will range from 1000 to 1200, and for the infant it is 400. Now, before finishing today's video on vitamin A, I would just like to add one important information, and that is regarding the therapeutic uses of vitamin A, particularly in the form of retinoids. Now always remember, retinoids are vitamars of vitamin A, and they are used in the treatment of severe acne, psoriasis, and acute promyelocytic leukemia. However, also remember that retinoids are teratogenic, and therefore they should be avoided during pregnancy. So this concludes today's video on vitamin A. I hope this video was helpful. If you like my videos, do comment, share, subscribe, and let me know. And for my students, I will also recommend you to go through your textbooks for more informations. Okay, that's all for today. Until next time, take care and stay blessed. Thank you.